Well, I discuss this topic at the risk of being labeled a terrorist or possibly even inspiring terrorism myself. That is the prevailing narrative now. Either unquestionably accept the rainbow propaganda or you endorse mass shootings at gay bars. You're probably even a co-conspirator, says the GLAAD CEO.
I think that DeSantis, Boebert, they have blood on their hands on this. Whatever the motive comes out to be, we know that there is an increase in this culture of hate and rhetoric around our community that is resulting in real-world harm. Couple that with social media platforms that are monetizing hate, that are monetizing lies, and they're not stopping, and they have the tools to stop it.
Whatever the motive is, we know what caused the motive, and that is certainly my political opponents, who absolutely must be censored accordingly. Well, that is awfully convenient. It's also awfully convenient that there are apparently no risks whatsoever to surrendering everything to one particular fringe political perspective, including criticism itself. But we will take the risk regardless, because a world without critical thinking is actually a far worse hellscape than any other of which these activists warn. The best ideas withstand scrutiny. They don't hide from it, and they certainly don't call for that scrutiny to be abolished. After all, the rainbow agenda claims to be based in science. You're supposed to trust the science. You're supposed to follow the science. You're supposed to bend over and take it from the science. But science itself means exhausting all questions. Science means rigorous challenge. Shut up for the science is a contradiction in terms. It's supposedly on the basis of science that we know that gender transitions for minors are a sound practice, for example. That's what we're told. Here's Biden's Assistant Secretary of Health, Rachel Levine, speaking with the Stanford Pediatrics Department over the summer, emphasizing that gender transitions for kids are not based on ideology. They are based on medical research. And so state laws should never intervene with the experts. Studies confirm it.
It's very important to note that the fact that the appropriateness of a range of medical treatments, evaluations, and treatments of people who are transgender and transgender youth is thoroughly grounded in medical research. And we do not lead state laws and actions that dictate principles of transgender medical care by us, pediatric experts. Studies clearly show that gender-affirming care results in positive mental health outcomes. And I won't quote them all, but there are 6 articles published in 2020, 4 articles in 2021, and 1 new one in 2022.
I won't quote them all. I'll just reference them generically in a way that you can't actually look up for yourself. Besides, there's no time to reference all of these specifics anyway, but there is plenty of time to discuss policy statements from these clinics instead.
There is a broad consensus about transgender medical care and gender affirmation treatment. Our own American Academy of Pediatrics, in a policy statement in 2018, advocates for gender affirmative model of care. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, in their policy statement, outlines affirmative clinical practices.
But that's the thing about policy statements. They are inherently political, as the name signifies. These are judgments about the exercise of power, not judgments about the findings of science. These things can align, but not necessarily, and quite often they don't. But fine. Let's give Rachel the benefit of the doubt and assume that all of these pediatric clinic policies are in fact scientifically based and not ideologically based, even though the science is just glossed over and the ideology is not. But if we're supposed to trust the science, well, then it should be easy to produce the science upon request. As recently as 5 years ago, though, Rachel Levine actually could not. Rachel Levine had to email somebody else, not just for the science, but for any science, to say that gender transition surgeries for kids are effective treatment, creating positive results. Rachel Levine comes from Pennsylvania, where he was previously the Secretary of the State Department of Health. During that tenure in 2017, Levine sent an email to Nadia Doushin, the co-founder of the gender clinic at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, absurdly referred to by its acronym CHOP, because, of course, the truth has to be far stranger than fiction. This email asked for any scientific literature to show that gender reassignment surgery for young people under 18, including top surgery for young men and top and bottom surgery for young women, is a beneficial procedure. Doushin replied saying she is not aware of any existing literature, but it is certainly happening, as in gender reassignment surgery for kids is certainly happening. And not just in general, but at her clinic specifically. Daushin writes, I think we've had more than 10 patients who have had chest surgery under 18, as young as 15, and one bottom surgery on a 17-year-old. Trust the experts is the mantra, and so apparently somebody consulted expert Rachel Levine looking for the science behind this practice, and somehow expert Rachel Levine was stumped, and so he called his expert friend who actually does it at the CHOP clinic, and the CHOP clinic lady also said, you know what? I don't actually know either. Hold on. Let me put down this knife for a second and see if I can find anything. And she couldn't. She had no references to provide. So Daushin, the CHOP lady, told Levine she would have one of her researchers search for literature and get back. Levine said that would be helpful, and that's the end of the conversation as we can see it. But hey, I'm sure all of that was cleared up. This is a woman of surgical precision, of course. Surely she would not be operating without a clear scientific basis to do so. After all, we were assured that is not the case by people with a direct incentive in the practice, financial or otherwise. Why would they lie other than the fact that their wallets and their worldview depend on it? But of course, that exchange was 5 years ago. As we've learned in the vaccine context, a lot can change at the speed of science in the time since. And in fairness to Rachel, he did make study citations in his presentation at Stanford over the summer. The problem is they were generic. There were no authors or titles named, so I can't look them up for myself. But let's assume that these studies exist and that they say what he says they say, that gender reassignment surgery for kids is beneficial. There are still some points for concern. Number one, I am always going to be skeptical of any study claiming to show that a child's whims are best appeased by knife blade, even if every kid whose leg you amputate in pursuit of his pirate dreams does grow up to sail the seven seas and find all the buried treasure. I am still going to wonder if maybe he would have been better off just scuba diving with two legs instead. Number two, even if Levine and the CHOP lady do have the evidence now, they did not then. The CHOP lady was still admittedly conducting these surgeries on minors in the absence of evidence at the time. So even if these procedures became scientifically sound later, they were experimental when she started. That is not, in fact, based in science. That is based in lucky guesswork at its most innocent. At its worst, it's actually ideological bloodlust for kids. And number three, even if I grant that all of these studies that Levine is ambiguously citing are in fact authentic and organic conclusions from impartial scientific investigation and not ideological utility, note the dates. The studies that Levine cites are from 2020, 2021, and 2022, and per the email by his own admission, he was aware of none prior. Meaning, even if this is some groundbreaking new scientific discovery, by virtue of its newness, you have no long-term evaluation. What you're saying is that you hacked somebody up yesterday and then you asked them how they're doing today with no evaluation for how they're doing 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or beyond, if they're even around to answer the question at that point at all. If I was locked in to every decision that I made at 16 permanently, I might have just a few regrets about eternalizing my teenage foolishness. Don't worry about it though, because time is just a number, says the CHOP lady, just like age itself. So sure, I may not have been mature and wise enough as a teenager to make every decision for the rest of my life, but many are.
What would be the youngest that you would have referred a patient for either of those surgeries?
As young as age 14 is probably sometime between 14 and 15 is the youngest. And again, I think it's really important to remember that age is a number, but as an adolescent medicine and developmental specialist, we know that where a child is cognitively and socially is more important than that exact number of their age.
And of course, these aren't permanent decisions anyway. After all, the pirate kid can still get a peg leg. So even if a young lady does grow to regret the chest hacking, well, She can just do what half of Hollywood already does anyway. Here's the Chop Lady's colleague at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles.
Adolescents actually have the capacity to make a reasoned, logical decision. And here's the other thing about chest surgery. If you want breasts at a later point in your life, you can go and get them.
And remember the most important point here. Should you notice any of this foolishness, or should you dare have any public questions about it, you are the real problem. You are responsible for the maiming and mutilation of others, not the people actually doing the maiming and mutilating. Speech is the menace, and the actual knives are the virtue. If the costuming didn't already do so, you are officially welcomed to the Upside Down. Just please don't say anything mean about Vecna. He doesn't take kindly to that sort of thing. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Minds, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chatting my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.